Jeff, how you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to having a conversation with you. You and I met at Palm Springs on a really nice day at the Entrepreneur of the Year Award conference by EY. And unfortunately, we're not there right now, but you and I got a little bit of a taste of that after having some conversations about surfing and all the fun stuff that you enjoy doing. But, what really caught my attention when we were chatting at lunch is how many different things you've done. And you had told me I was doing mortar business. I had a mortar business, a software business, and now I'm doing dental. And so I just was too intrigued to not get you on the show. But maybe for the listeners, Jeff, let's go back. Like, when did you decide or accidentally jump into? I mean, what was your first entrepreneurial deal? Like, how did you end up becoming and deciding jumping in with both feet?
Well, I was in high tech for almost 18 years. So I had a rep firm where I repped manufacturers in the computer industry in Southern California. And when computers were really taking off, the computer industry, so that was really fun. And then I was a company with megahertz that went public. And then I had my own software company that did internet filtering. And I sold that in Silicon Valley after about 5 years sold to a public company. So I really started in high tech, really, and for several years.
So, was it for the sheer exposure that you got from other people that were doing this? So did you start the rep firm, or did you how did you decide that, okay, I'm going to own this company and here's what I'm going to do? Or was it, just kind of the nature of being in California and kind of the stuff that was going on that you decide, okay, well, this just makes sense?
Well, I guess it was kind of my start of being a serial entrepreneur. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I just had to find that moment. So I was always kind of looking, but there's that time of, I'm secure in a job, to how do I move to taking the risk and going, right? And so luckily I was with a manufacturer that said, hey, we have manufacturer rep firms, and if you want to be our rep in Southern California, we will, because our rep had retired, we would be delighted to have you do it. So it kind of lessened the risk. So I just felt it was a time to go. And I found another manufacturer that was willing to have me rep them. And so really from day one, I was doing really well, meaning that there's tremendous cash flow from the beginning. So it was just kind of something where you kind of have to keep looking for those opportunities, and you have to be patient. And then when the time comes and you feel it's the right time, you can do it. So
what were the manufacturers?
Back then it was called Megahertz, and there's a company called Targus. They make carrying cases, and they've been around, for a long time. But then I had Kodak digital cameras, and then I had Intel way back when they had these different chips that they sold. So this is really like 1990 to 2000. I had it for almost 10 years.
So what are some of the milestones? Because, some of the kind of different avenues I want to go with your experience and is, what your vast amount of accumulated knowledge from these different ventures. Because, a lot of people struggle with the first company that they're building. They're, it's cash flow and they're just kind of grinding away versus, okay, this is an asset. How am I going to sell? I mean, did you intend to sell it, or what was the milestones or the kind of the evolution with the first, company that you had? What kind of mindset and what was the triggering event, and how did that whole journey work?
Well, I think the first time around, I didn't kind of like you, when you all sold your company, I didn't know a lot, I didn't know actually what happened when I had my first company. It's kind of like an ad agency. If you have a rep firm, it's kind of like about you. What I mean by that is you're kind of the value. And so when you leave, there's not a lot to sell. So it's harder. Like when I say an ad agency, if you have a small ad agency, it's hard to sell it because you're kind of, you are the agency really. So and I was making all these manufacturers money. Like somebody would come in the market and I would help them get into distribution, help them do really, really well, and go, wow, I just made them a lot of money. And so I was getting good cash flow. So I was getting paid commissions and doing really, really well. But I realized I wasn't developing a lot of equity. So it was great because I actually was able to accumulate a lot of cash and invest it. And then when I wanted to start my other company later, I had my own money to put in, as opposed to just getting investors. I could put my own money in addition to investors at least, but I'm kind of bought in and into a deal. So really the first one, I didn't really have much of an exit per se. I sold it and I just got paid over a 3-year period. But that's when I said, look, I'm going to start a company where I can get equity and leverage myself. And so that I can, have more of an event, where you're getting, future cash flows and have a nice event where I can get some cash out and, provide some retirement for my family. So the first one, I didn't really, it wasn't a big event. It was a good cash flow along the way, but there wasn't much of an event when selling it.
Did you, was there like an event that happened and said, okay, was there like, where was that realization? Did you talk to someone? Did someone say, hey, by the way, you've got essentially a very high paying job here, or you're going to have to work for someone? Did someone, approach you? Where did that realization come in that part of the process?
As far as the first one, like
Yeah,
in,
yeah, yeah. Like, I mean, where you started to realize, oh, okay, the values mean I'm gonna have to work for 3 more years to transition relationships. I
I
mean,
think what happened is literally when I was literally repping manufacturers that would come, they'd be new in the marketplace. They'd have this good idea, and I would help them through their distribution and go, wow, I just made these guys a bunch of money. And, they sold this thing for 100X, whatever. Like, why am I not doing this myself? And that's when I started
right.
my first high tech company after that, because I felt like I had connections and knew how to create value from a sales and marketing standpoint. And so that's when I decided, basically literally being in the middle of helping other people be successful, which is great, by the way. I didn't regret it at all. I just thought, this is probably something I had to think about. And then I learned from them, oh, so you actually raised some money and then you built value and then you sold this company and you sold to private equity, or you did a strategic. And I started learning about that process as I saw the manufacturers I represented go through that process of starting up to exiting. And so I literally through them, I actually saw how that, when I got to be, get relationships with these folks, I started learning kind of how that process worked and how they raised money and how they exited and how people, some of them did it pretty well and had thought it through. So I learned from them. So when I did my next company, it helped me in raising money and then in going through that process and exiting.
So, well, let's kind of maybe take it in steps in throughout the journey here. When you, so that internet filtering company, so you had for 5 years. So like, what was your thought process going in when you started it? Did you have a certain dollar amount? I mean, with more of the end in mind, what was your goals did you think about the exit? Did you think about timing, valuations, all that kind of stuff? What was the kind of the process there?
I think I did, and maybe too much so. I mean, I think that the first thing that I think you need to think about when you're starting a company is just about building value and focusing on that. I mean, you have to think about the exit because you have to be thinking about how you govern the company if you were going to have an exit, meaning that you have to have good corporate governance and, you can't just be running out spending money, especially if you raise money, of course, then you don't have that. You can't make it like a family business at that point. You have a fiduciary responsibility to your investors, obviously, but of course you have to think about the exit at some level, and they make you think about it because the investors have to have an exit, right? So once you
Mhm.
take money, then you have to have an exit, right? You have to have a way for them, and you have to understand what their time frame is. I mean, some of these guys, their funds are like an 8-year fund, and so or a 5-year deal, and so they even put it in the agreement, that you have to exit at some point. So unfortunately, you kind of have to think that way. Hopefully, with private equity or VC, some kind of money, you have a time frame that is realistic to really build value. And so, and of course, they can help you as you go along as you bring money in from folks.
So you said you didn't raise money in that internet filtering company. So did you?
I did. I actually did. I put my own money in it to start, which was
Got it.
good because I was able to create some value. And in every round, I put more of my own money in. So I participated in every round of funding. I think we did like 4 or 5 rounds, and I put in every round, which I think was very helpful to me because I was able to make quite a bit from that, as opposed to just the common shares didn't do as well. And so I was able to do really well in the investment piece as well as.
Can you walk us through that? Because I think there's a lot of mystery around where you find these investors. How do you do the rounds? I mean, what are you pitching to them? What were you describing to them, which was your plan and how they were going to be doing it and how they get their money? And I mean, what was the appeal for you in the business for them?
When I went to raise money, I told them how I put my own money in, and they really liked that a lot. That they knew I was kind of invested. I was kind of all in. I think when you do a startup, I think that investors want you to kind of be all in. When you get bigger, like a bigger company like the ones I've done before, my last company was 250 million. Then it almost kind of works against you if you're on, because you're very timid about things, because you're like, if I make one mistake, I lose everything. And especially when there's so much there's so much value there. So in a startup, I think investors like that you're kind of all in a startup mode, because they want you to make sure that you're there for the long haul. So I think having me put money was very good, I think, from that perspective. And some people, if they don't have the kind of funds to put in, they're putting a bunch of sweat equity in typically up front to prove, the model out and hit milestones to then collect the next, to raise the next money, the next.
So with that many rounds on that first one, what was the exit strategy that you were pitching to them? Did you have like buyers in mind or valuation in mind?
Yeah, good question. So I think I told them, I think what I showed them is that, look, clearly there are strategic investors out there, and that's probably the most obvious, and they love that. And that's what we ended up doing, by the way, was a strategic. But we also felt like we could potentially get private equity in that it was very high margin, that we probably could get private equity at some point to come in. But we ended up doing strategic, and they really liked that because I think we got a lot more value out of it because they could take 1 + 1 = 10 for them, right? We provided so much value for them.
What was some of the, was there a time horizon and like maybe some context behind this, Jeff, is like, I think a lot of people, ideally that it is a strategic buyout, which is what you're moving towards. How did the operational and strategic decisions in the company, how did those decisions reflect your ultimate goal? Like, because I think some people will not build out certain products if they're going to be competing with the person that they want to sell to. So like, I think, recalibrating all that stuff, how did you, was there certain things that you were doing to march to, that direction?
If you think of the book Good to Great, they always talk about, you want to be the best at the world or whatever you do. And so sometimes the best way to be the best is to make the world smaller, to make sure that you add value. So I was always focusing on, what we did is we provided internet filtering, and we were kind of like the Intel inside of URL filtering, if that makes sense. Meaning that we were building URL filter that would work for, back then they were like firewalls, or they were boxes, they were where they control the data flowed in and out of the data that flowed in and out. And so we were a model that was which is almost like in the cloud before there was in the cloud. They called an ASP model, but back then we had this idea that, the filtering would be off the box. And so you don't have to weigh that box down. So it really works good for small little hubs that, that you would, I can't think of who are the brands now, like Linksys, or I don't know who the, back then it was, we were with the top 3. SonicWall was one of the top 3 that we had an OEM relationship. So we thought, wow, we'll just focus on being the best at that. We'll be the Intel inside, and then we can win at that. So our company was probably more of a service on top of another. We kind of realized, gosh, we'd probably be better off just being a service for these big boxes and not have our own box or anything, but just be that piece that they would need and wouldn't really be able to develop. We felt that was something that we could we could win at and not worry about competing, because they'd be better off just using us than they would try to develop themselves, because they have to do whatever they do. So we got patents on it. We were able to develop something that was unique, that would really work with anybody we worked with, could use our service, and we could be that.
So, in I think for maybe some context, what are the other companies that you've bought and sold and started and sold? Because then I want to maybe circle back, Jeff, because I think there's all these strategic decisions, like you talked about patents and all these different things that create value. And I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs that they don't really understand where the value is for the different exits. So aligning like the value with the potential buyers, so we can maybe circle back. But okay. What are the other couple ones? Because they're super unique.
Yeah. So after that, I was really interesting. I bought a brick company, literally. It was a brick company.
Software to bricks.
My buddies always laugh, brick and mortar. But what I realized is that there's a lot of boring industries where they're good at their skill. Like, for example, if you're a mason, you're good at being a mason, but you're not necessarily a good business person per se. And so what we realized, and I won't go detail too much, but basically we realized that you realize what's the real value providing. We realized that people just want to have a beautiful home. And so they want the exterior to look good. That's what they really want. And so we said, so we can build a killer showroom. We can take pictures, and we can make it a wonderful process for a woman, because they're usually ones who are making decisions on the outside of the home, on the home itself. So they can literally not make a mistake, right? They can pick these colors that all go together, and it'll look beautiful on the outside of the home. And so we realized what job we were really doing, and we're like, what job we were really performing. And we realized the real job was that. Then it wasn't about bricks so much. It was about having a pretty exterior and pulling it all together. And then once we figured that out, we took over the market, and we had the best showroom. We had the best solution for the market. And so everybody came to us. So we really focused on, creating value, but using technology because we were high tech guys for that marketplace to make it easier for everyone. So we had by far the best technology of any of our competitors. And so we just made it a much better process using technology. So we thought, gosh, let's use technology in these boring businesses like brick and mortar, for heaven's sakes, is boring, but we made it so it was, we realized it wasn't about brick and mortar. It was about, it was about picking the exterior of your home that you're going to have a mortgage on for 30 years. It's a big purchasing decision, right? And if you screw up and don't make it, it doesn't look good. It's very disappointing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of money that you're like, oops. And so we thought, well, if we can make beautiful, help people pick it, that is what we're all about. So we were learning what the real value was and creating value.
Did you buy a company? Did you start one?
Yes. So that was the first time I bought one. So before that, I had started from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
And then I said, man, I like this whole buying idea because then you're already kind of further along. And so
you got cash flow.
Yeah, you got cash flow. And so we really kind of bought some cash flow in a way. So we started with, like cash flow, right? Like we already could pay ourselves salaries and everything. So because we had a couple exits, we had the cash flow to do ourselves. So my business partner and I, he was with me at Siberian, which was the company. He actually helped me, or him and I went in together on this. And we had a 29x return in 2 years. We literally bought the company and 5 times the business. It's still doing well today, by the way, and 5 times the business. And with the cash flow you put down, it was a 29x return for us over a 2-year period.
So, I mean, I don't know if you're comfortable sharing some of the top line. I mean, like what was the size infrastructure, maybe employees or top line? I mean, how did you guys grow so fast?
It was kind of smaller. We only had, I think, maybe 30 employees or something, but we did, I think I want to say we did, I think 40 million. And I think our EBITDA, I think we ended up getting like 13x EBITDA. So it's a pretty good multiple.
Was that what kind of a strategic buyer, private equity firm? Who was that? I mean, were marching towards the exit the whole time?
It was a company that was doing building materials. So they were doing like roofing and siding like nationwide. And so they were they loved our model to do it nationwide. They said, you guys are the best we've seen for what you do for selling exterior solutions. And we want to be able to roll what you do out nationwide. So, we can take it in other markets. We'll just use your model.
And when you guys bought it, thinking about it more like an investment and creating value, like you were saying, was there a timing or a dollar amount or like something that you were marching towards, or did that kind of, how did that fall?
Yeah, I think, well, at the end of the day, we said, look, this guy just has this lifestyle business. He has all these exclusive brick, and he just, he probably makes $800K a year. And so he doesn't do any marketing, any sales. And we could just tell that he had by far the best brick. And if we marketed and told people about it and created the best showroom in the country. Mm-hmm. And as I mentioned, we found out what our job really was, that we could do really, really well. And we did. We just, it was underperforming for what they had. Right. Mm-hmm. So, which is fine. Right. I mean, if you're making 800,000 a year, you're happy. That's great. You vacation a lot. You just didn't really care to grow it. So, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. We just thought, wow, let's let the whole world know about it, or, let's let the rest of the state and surrounding states know about it, and we can increase the sales significantly.
So on a couple of these, both of those exits that you've talked about, where did you find the buyers? Did you hire an investment banker? Did you have someone knock on the door, or did you knock on their door?
So the biggest one, when I met you, I was an alumni for Entrepreneur of the Year. So the next company,
keep going. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I was well, I won't go. There's one called Clearplex. We did a windshield film for, and we ended up selling that. It was kind of underwhelming, to be honest with you. I kind of started it. We got some patents, and then we just couldn't. It took forever after a year or so. I'm like, this is killing me. Let's just sell it off, and then we'll keep a piece of it. There's a windshield film for cars, and we were selling it to like rental car companies. Mm-hmm. And then the one I bought this company for about 20 million. Me and my partner did, and we grew it to over 250 million. Called Ingram Medical, and that was what we got Entrepreneur of the Year for, me and my partner, for Utah, and then we were finalists in national. So when I met you, that's what I was back for as an alumni going back there. Mm-hmm. That was the biggest company. We had 1,100 employees. That was like 20 people to 1,100. So that was by far the biggest company I had been part of. And so that was probably our biggest and hardest one, just because it was a lot of people and a lot of volume. And
Well, and what's interesting too is like when we were at the EY conference and as you kind of look at these different journeys that you've gone through, $250 million in revenue and 1,100 employees, you get the best of the best advice, but I think there's also, there's just holes in the processes all over the
Yeah,
place.
for sure.
Like,
For sure.
and so many times, even a company like that, and even look what's going on with, with Comcast and Disney and all this stuff going on right now. It's like, it's really just businesses buying other businesses for, they're buying cash flow or buying strategies or go-to-market strategies. But, so a lot of that stuff happens naturally out of a conversation. So you're at the EY conference, like, hey, I should buy you. But like, did you know what you wanted and why? Did you know how much it was worth? Did you have timing? Like, did you have people that were helping you engineer that, or did it just kind of come in?
So I actually used, so there was back to Beehive, that was the first time I'd used an investment banker. And there was a person that focused on just the building industry. So he said, you know what, you're kind of small, because with investment banking, you need to have a certain size. Obviously for somebody in your medical, I mean, obviously 250 is a good size, and that was easy to get investment bankers. We were talking to the largest, that was easier to get investment banker for that. But it was harder when you're smaller. But I actually found at Boutique when they focused on that industry, he literally said, I think I got a buyer for you. He literally brought 2 buyers in, the second one bought it. So it was kind of unique in that it was actually a fairly simple process. We wanted, they were willing to pay it. So I was actually kind of surprised, like, wow, that was easy. With Ingram, we actually, we did 2 private equity rounds. So we made money, but we just wanted to use them. We made money, really good EBITDA, but we wanted to exit little by little. So we actually did 3 rounds where we actually sold to private equity to sell off little by little. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Did you do 3 rounds with the same PE firm, or did you?
Different. And that way we could keep running the company and have fun, and there's no need to really sell it, but you could kind of, get some retirement for your family but still own it and just little by little sell it off. So that's kind of how we hit, and still keep a piece of the company. But with that one, we actually had, and I also did a debt round where I used a couple times where I used iBankers for raising debt. And there's ones that focus on just that. And that was great because they did a whole process, brought these guys in. It was really very helpful to help you run your business. And
can you explain that for the listeners, Jeff? Because like I've had some people on the show where we've talked about PE recaps and kind of how that works and the second bite of the apple and some of that stuff. But there hasn't been a whole lot on like actually just raising money for debt. How is that different than equity versus all the other different ways?
Yeah, and so we did both. We raised money for debt and equity. So that way we could leverage. We could obviously as shareholders, because all the money was going to the shareholders, and I was the largest. So I was getting debt money, which was nice because you're still keeping, obviously a lot of the company. And so raising debt obviously is nice because you don't lose any of the company, but you have cash available to you. We can put debt on the books for the company, and then you can, we only did 1x EBITDA, which is very low. They'll do as much as 3 or 4. So it was pretty low, it was pretty conservative, but allows us to leverage our money instead of just selling equity. We're also able to put some debt in the books and give shareholders some money, so payout.
So, and who are the players that are usually? I mean, when you say the iBankers actually go out there raising debt, I mean, is it specific banks that they're running their pension funds, or like where are they actually finding the debt for the whole deal?
I think when we did it, we had the iBanker just was going to banks that would provide the debt, or sometimes there's mezz, depending on there's mezz lenders that do just mezz only. We were actually going to banks, so the bigger banks like Bank of America, things like that. So
when you started that, the last business, you said, so you went from, what was the original one to 250 million? Like what was it what's that?
What went from 20 to 250? The funny thing is, it was completely different business. We bought a wholesale business, completely pivoted to direct to consumer model. So it was like that money completely went away. So it was almost basically starting from scratch. We basically started a new business where we were selling direct to consumer. So we had 0 revenue in that area, but we reused the wholesale to kind of get us there, over a couple of year period. And then we just pivoted.
Did you, when going from wholesale to direct to consumer, were you upsetting other distributors or anything like that along the way, or was it a different product or service that you were able to market?
Yeah, I mean, in the healthcare, it's very monopolistic. Like, they only have like 3 or 4 major PBMs, and they have exclusive contracts. So yeah, we were definitely disrupting and upsetting people for sure.
So As you look at, all these different ventures that you've gone on, and just, I mean, the sheer quantity of the people and the conversations that you're having around value creation, returns, and, different rounds of financing and stuff like that, what are the different things that you've seen that really have extreme value when you're looking at stuff like that? Is it patents? Is it management team? Is it contract? All these different things you've probably seen, because, what maybe surprised you, or, what did you continue to gravitate towards because you saw the success?
I think when we're looking for an idea, I'm looking for something where I feel like I can provide value. And so what drives me is two things. One is providing value, like just seeing, like the new company I started, Jet Dental. It's so cool to see this idea and see there's a hole in the market. Like there is definitely dental. I think going to the dentist sucks. And I thought, what if we could make it a better experience? That would be really cool. And so some of those things become very personal, like even to you,
Right.
you go, I think it sucks. And so if I can make it better, I can relate to it, So we always look for things where we can create value. And I think I'll have fun doing it, right? Like I said, this will be fun. Like I think some people confuse passion with like I have a friend, I like surfing, like, and I do too. I'm like, but I'm not going to start a surfing business because I think that business sucks.
Right.
I don't think you can make money. And I want to, I'm in the business to make money, what I'm doing, right? Unless I'm doing a nonprofit. And so I look at the dollar size too, like, well, the opportunity, I'm like, I don't know. There's a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of people in that business. And I just think people think that if they're passionate about something like surfing or some industry, that's the passion. To me, it has nothing, obviously, it has nothing to do with what I'm doing so much, meaning that what industry or whatever. It's about, am I creating value and am I making a difference? Ingram Medical, I felt we really made a difference for diabetics' lives and the people we work with. And Jet Dental, we're totally making a difference. I mean, you look, I look every day at the people I work with, and the people we serve, and it's exciting. So to me, it's two things. It's the people I work with and seeing them grow, and then seeing you fill a hole in the marketplace and satisfying customers. It's super exciting to me, no matter what you do. It doesn't have to be, surfing, which I enjoy. I mean, that's just a hobby that has nothing to do with work. But
so what's your definition of filling a hole in the market?
I just see that where there's a need, and I go, wow, we can fulfill a need. So what we saw is that people were not getting their teeth cleaned like they're supposed to, right? Like you're supposed to preventative, right? You're supposed to get your teeth cleaned every 6 months and get an exam, and people aren't doing it. I thought, why? I thought, well, who the hell wants to go to the dentist? And you call your dentist, he's like, well, I'm available in 4 weeks, and I'm gone these 2 weeks. And by the way, you can go Monday through Thursday from 9 to 3. It's like, holy hell, it's worse than it's worse than the bank. These guys, I mean, we say bankers hours. We'll call them dentist hours. They're like and I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with dentists. I mean,
yeah, right. Because
that's not best for the consumer. When do you want to go? I'd rather go at 6 o'clock at night. I don't want to go, I like to do it when I'm at work. Come to me. So that's why we had this idea of like, let's just go to businesses, the best businesses in this country, and let's just bring the dentist to them and do it right then and there. And then all of a sudden we got everybody coming. And so now all the people that weren't getting their teeth cleaned are now getting them cleaned, and now they're back getting good oral health. And we had found 2 people had oral cancer. So we basically saved 2 people's lives because we caught it early. You can get early detection of serious diseases in your mouth if you can get it early. And so we got people back on oral health and feeling better. And that's very rewarding, getting people to, because you're twice as likely with half America has gum disease, and you're twice as likely to get a stroke and 3 times likely to have a heart attack if you have gum disease. I'm like, well, that's kind of a serious thing. If we can fix that, that'd be awesome. So I think it's just looking for needs in the marketplace. And that's why I think it's kind of unique what I do, because I think most people are in a business, right? Like maybe they work for IBM and they go, oh, look at this cool idea. I'll go and start my company. When I was with Procter & Gamble straight out of school, I know several guys that left because, it wasn't a big enough market for P&G. And so these guys said, hey, look at this hole we found in this consumer packaged goods area, right? And they start a business. Mm-hmm. I think it's a little unique to do what I do, which is kind of like going a completely different area. That's kind of unique and different. I wouldn't recommend it, actually. I think it's better off to be in an industry you're already in and have contacts, and then, find an opportunity or see a need in the marketplace. But I think it's kind of like heads up, right? It's looking for opportunities and kind of having that desire and passion. And it kind of just finds its way, in my opinion. Like if you really work at it and you're passionate about it, you'll find a way, you'll find an opportunity if you're always looking and thinking about it.
And it's interesting because, I mean, honestly, Jeff, since we had lunch back in November, I've told your story about Jet Dental I don't know how many times because I'm just like, I hate the dentist and I can't believe how inconvenient it is. And like, explain to the listeners like, so yeah, you kind of brushed over it about the,
Oh,
hours and stuff, but like explain like how you translate that into the business model, because I think it's so fascinating when you really go, okay, well, because like most people say, well, dentist office isn't worth anything because it goes right back to that ad agency model, which is what you described, because they're working and they're trading dollars for hours, and then if they leave, then they don't have a job or they don't have the company.
well,
So,
do you know what? Well, they can sell to their dentist, but do you know what the deal? So you can work your whole, life. Let's say you work 20 years, and what you sell it for? You sell it for 80% of what you collect in a given year. That's what you
yeah,
sell it for. I'm
that's
like, holy
crazy.
shit. So like if you're doing $1 million a year, and I'm talking about revenue, right? Let's say, so
Yep.
let's
Yep.
a good dental office maybe does about $1 million. That's probably pretty good for a dental office. You're gonna sell the thing for 800 grand. I'm like, God damn, that's like, I'm not saying that's bad, but it's not like necessarily doesn't,
And it's
have any.
probably an earnout too, right? Or like
No, yeah, kind of,
they have
sort
to
of.
work for it,
It's
broad,
pretty
right?
much. Yeah, kind of, sort of. Well, yeah, you know what they do is they typically will buy it, but then they'll say, "But I need you to stay on for a year because I need you to make a transition." And so I don't know. It just it didn't seem that exciting to me, but and I just think we just felt like consumers would love what we're doing, and it has. We're like in every major, well, I say every major, but most of the big companies here in Utah, we got into all of them, and all this, they call them Silicon Slopes companies. All the high tech companies were in basically every one
Okay,
here.
so like that. Well, explain to the listeners. So how did you take the old dentist model and then actually change it from like the timings and explaining how to like how you're going to the company? So I think because I think it's just genius.
It's kind of a disruptive idea, meaning that, dentists are still doing their thing, and that's great. It's just kind of a different idea. It's like we're delivering a different way, and I don't think it even really. Matter of fact, I'd argue we're not even hurting the dentists. We're kind of creating a better, more oral health. So we're just increasing
The
more
pie.
dentists.
Yep.
What's happening is, so what happens? We go into a business, we meet with HR, and we say, hey, look, let me just come to your and just you have a dental insurance. It covers preventative. It covers your exam, which includes X-rays and teeth cleaning. So just what you would do, an oral hygiene, an appointment when you go to a dentist's office. And so we said, why don't we just go there and we'll do them in your office? And we showed them how we could do it. And then we started, once we hit the, few big companies, and everybody started jumping on, Sinclair Oil. And so we have a lot of nationwide companies too, Skywest Airlines. And so once we show them that people wanted to do it, so that HR people would send an email from us, they'd sign up, they go, holy mackerel, everybody was signing up. They get 20-25% of the company was signing up, which is pretty, you got to do it 2,000 quite frankly, that's a lot. So we're doing like 8 or 9 people an hour, with a dentist, a whole bunch of hygienists. And so we realized there was a big need for it. People really want it. I had a single mom come to me. She goes, I have 4 kids and I can come bring them to the office, and we did our whole family in 1 hour, because, most offices are going to have 1 or 2 hygienists an hour. But we
Mm-hmm.
have 7 or 8. And so we're just saving people tons of time, and then we're getting people to come that normally wouldn't go. So we found is 80% of the people that come, that sign up to come the days that we're there, have not been to dentist in over 2 years. So we're finding we're creating a whole new market where basically people that weren't going are now going.
Mm-hmm.
And so now we're getting a whole bunch of people going, and then we can do the basic dentistry that can be like, if they have cavities, we can do it there, or a crown, or we do teeth whitenings too, by the way. So we want to give them a confident smile. We do Invisalign so we can get teeth straightening, because we go every quarter, we can kind of watch them and see them. So we're kind of getting this clientele and base that we come every quarter back to the business. And then every 6 months, you get your checkup. So we're seeing the same people over and over. And then if they have more complicated things, we refer that to the dentist. But we're finding people that just haven't been in 2 years. Now all of a sudden they're going, and now they have work that needs to be done. And we can do a lot of it. And then we can refer out what we can't do that's more complicated, meaning that, it needs to be done in an office. So we're actually increasing health and awareness and
Mm-hmm.
getting people to do more preventative, and therefore we're increasing the dental share in our market. We're just getting new business, if that makes sense.
So you can just hear the passion in your voice. And I think, like I said, the reason I've told that story so many times is because it's just awesome. And you can hear the fact that you're having fun while you're making money. And, I'm just curious, like when you look at these different companies that in the different industries and the total spectrum of the things that you've talked about on a daily basis, like what do you is it creating things and disrupting markets that's fun for you? What's your definition of fun? And then what happens when you're no longer having fun, and how do you mitigate damage?
I think, for me, the fun part is twofold. One is creating value. Like, it's so fun to me that we just had this idea and it's working. I'm like, you go to some of the biggest companies in our valley and they're all signing up with us. And it's like, wow, this is awesome. I mean, one of the largest companies we have here is called Vivint, and having them, one of the largest companies in the valley that's successful, worth a few billion, they bought by Blackstone, I mean, it's a
Hmm.
killer company nationwide. And they go, yeah, this is great. Like, why wouldn't we do it? And having them say, why wouldn't we do it? And why hadn't somebody done this before? It's pretty exciting. And then to serve the customer, have the customer say, thank you, thank you, thank you. And the wonderful testimonials we get and how appreciative they are for our service, that just drives the heck out of me. And then to see our employees grow, and we have a lot of people, most of our employees are women, and to see them grow and tell them how much they appreciate, guys, I've never been a manager before, and teaching somebody in their trade how to be a manager, and people have this untapped talent, and to see them go from managing nobody to several dozens of people and perform and do well, that's exciting too, that we can mentor and help people become managers. As if we've done it over the years, we can, not though I still have a ton to learn, but we can pass that on to them and help them grow. So I think seeing customers appreciate what you do and love it and give us great response and help us be better and to offer more services and do it better. And then number two, seeing your employees grow. And when you're a growing company, obviously you can provide more opportunities for people to grow because they can get management opportunities and promotions. And so those are two things I think drive me.
How
And
do
so,
you,
so
go ahead.
growth really is
Yeah,
what
yeah.
it's all about for me. Growing fast. I love growth. I love people growing. I like the company growing. It's exciting. Growth to me is what I love to do.
So what happens, do you have like an internal gauge of like, okay, I'm kind of maybe reaching the end of, my passion, or, maybe not passion, but the fun line here, or, how do you determine like, now is it a market timing, or is it an exit timing or value timing, or is it just, a personal, enjoyment timing? Cause I think the reason I ask that is, so many people, it's too late because they burn out and then they can't do the hard stuff.
That's a good point. One thing I think, in my opinion, most people go to work because they want to grow. They want to feel like they're providing value. And
Mm.
so I kind of have a barometer. I know that Todd, the CEO of Vivint, said, he goes to work every day and tries to create value. And so that's what I try to do is, and if you start feeling like you're not creating value or you don't want to create value, like you're kind of done and burnt out, or you're starting to get that direction, I think it's a good time to that's one trigger for sure. Because if you're not passionate, excited about it, you absolutely should get out, because that's what's going to drive the whole company is your passion. I think the way I look at things is I kind of look out ahead and think, here, partly for me, it's like once it gets too big, it's just not fun for me anymore, once it gets too big. So I think I'll know about that when that timing is, but right now I'm just having a good time and I'm just trying to build value so that at any time along the way, we could exit, right? Because I say, look, we're creating good value. We've structured this company the right way, and there's just always value being created. And so we could exit any time,
Well, I think you just hit on a huge note, that, like kind of a couple different ways, is because so many times I see where the entrepreneurs burnt out and then they didn't do this to create value and to be able to exit at any time, and then it's just too late. And, what are some of the things that you have done or do or recommend or wish you would have done to make sure that you can pull that ripcord whenever you want? Was there, people that you've met with, or, the financial, what is the way, obviously the stuff that you said about, continuing to create value for the customers and that kind of stuff, and growth is an important thing, but is there other stuff that you have done so that way when the opportunity arises, or you feel that triggering event, that you are ready?
Well, I think there's a couple of things to be thinking about. One is, remember I'd mentioned before, I think when you're in startup mode, you're not thinking about exiting at that point. Well, you're thinking down the road, but there's not the value there. And so you're trying to create value so that down the road you can. When you get to a company where you're making a lot of money, I think it can kind of work against you if you have all your eggs in one basket. It's like going out and buying Apple stock, right? Like that's, I don't
Hmm.
know that one in particular, but obviously that's going to go up and down, up and down. So, but if you have every single thing in your company and you have a lot of value, and let's say that you could literally retire off it, easily. My opinion is that you're better off to take a piece off the table, even if it's a smaller piece, and not have that stress of like you have everything in this one company. I think, in my opinion, and there's a varying opinion on this, but you should probably take some off the table at some point so that you can take care of your family. And that's just the way I look at it. People probably look at it differently.
No,
But
I think you bring up a really good point, but I think that brings up a kind of a piggybacking question for me, because I even spoke in front of a group today that has very substantially big size companies, and private equity ready, or the size and stuff like that. But even kind of like, I think a lot of people can relate to your passion and your enjoyment for your people and your customers. There's a lot of horror stories out there about people coming in there, they quote unquote want to take some chips off the table, but it totally goes the different direction, right? Someone comes in, it's either ownership, majority, or they bastardize the culture or the customers or the model and all these things. How do you avoid something like that? Or how have you avoided it?
Well, I think you need to take enough off the table. My buddies from New York, I'll clean it up a little bit. He said, you kind of want to get your FU money. So you kind of make sure there's enough that it's substantial so that if things do go south, you're okay financially, if that makes sense. So in other words, you may have lost a lot on the table, but I mean, there could have been more there, but you were able to do it. The other thing is, when we did it the first time, actually both times we had, they were minority. So there are private equities, but I think once you go to majority, I think it's kind of probably time to somewhat check out. I mean, well, not that you couldn't work there, but I think that once you go to majority, then if they don't do it the way you want, it's like, oh well, I got a great payday, and it's their company, and so it's their decision. So at some point, once they buy the majority, you have to realize, well, they're the majority, so that can happen, and it's something that you have to be prepared that could happen. And so, but if you're doing minority, the nice thing is you hopefully can control that as far as at least culture and things like that. There's probably some triggering events, even as a minority, that they can, in other words, where they have some, some veto power over some things. But that's probably more like just selling the company, things like that. You should have control of the board, and the kind of things you mentioned shouldn't happen, because you can control that.
Well, I think that's, there's a lot of assumptions, and, like all these private equity firms, like, well, we like majority, but I think to your point, if I'm hearing it correctly, is if you're creating value and you're doing the things that you want to, you can go find the person that wants minority.
There's a lot that want minority, by the way. There's a lot of companies like that.
I think it's false notions that everybody wants the majority because that's what everybody says, because they're the people out there.
No, there's quite a few that'll take that. They'll do the minority. And I think that in an exit, I think when I think of minority, I'm like, I want to stay on for a longer, but I just want to take some chips off the table.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's hard to sell majority and say, well, I'm gonna take some chips off the table, then I give it the majority. Well, that's kind of, once you do that, once you cross that threshold, then, you have to realize that you were not in the majority. And so things like that can happen. So you have to be prepared to make sure you have enough chips off the table that you're okay with walking away at some point.
So then, after you do a couple, and is that what you did with that one of the business with a couple minority rounds of PE firms? And then, what's the ultimate, bundled wrap to sell? Is it, I think you said you sold one to a public company, or is it, how do you then get everybody what they want? And are these minority people coming on board with timelines and, return expected?
Sure, yeah. That's the downside to it. Is like, you get to realize once you do that, then the clock starts ticking, and, people are expecting something down the road, maybe 5 years. And some of you have it contractually in 5 years, they kind of have the option to, make something happen. And so I think you have to realize that once you take money, then you are kind of married to these guys now, and you have responsibilities. So there's some downside to it too, or certainly some responsibilities now to doing it. So I think some people, I think they know their personalities, they know themselves. They say, you know what, I just want to sell out. I'm done. So there's varying reasons for people wanting to exit and get out. But for me, it's like, if you don't feel like you're adding a lot of value anymore, or you just feel like you need to get some chips off the table, combining those together is tough, thinking that through.
Mm-hmm.
And, but I think that you always need to think about value first. Am I creating value? Am I enjoying being part of this? And there's market conditions too. You might say, guys, there's a lot of risk now, and it might be a good time for me to take some, because I think the risk factor is high, and there's competitors, and there's probably partnering with somebody bigger maybe makes sense, because all this thing I built may go away if if I'm not competitive. And so you have to look at market conditions too as well.
How is it, like, as you've done the minority stuff, I'm assuming, because there's this emotional factor of all this stuff, right? Because you're so bought into these babies, especially you with creating these things. I mean, it's your second child, and you're so tied into it with your personality and your thoughts and ideas, and you're like an artist. So what is the experience you've had with these different journeys? Like, with the emotional transition? I mean, did it take you a while you had the company? How did you, or did you have the next idea from each of these stepping stones that it was easy for you? I mean, like, how did you cope with that?
I think it's very hard emotionally. But I think that's probably the mistake of a lot of people too, is they get too emotionally involved and they're not thinking about it clearly. I think you need to have some people help. I think whether it's an iBanker or, somebody that's kind of can look at this more objectively and help you, because I think people make too many emotional decisions in these things and they're not thinking clearly. It's their baby, so they think it's worth more than it really is. That's not realistic,
Mm-hmm.
or and so they get too emotional about it, and they have to. I think you need to. That's why I thought it was helpful to me to have some outside folks help me, and maybe a mentor, somebody else who's gone through this, talk them through, and just try to talk to you straight about it, and say, hey, here's the deal. And that was very helpful to me to have some people that can look at this not emotionally to help you make decisions, because I think that's a big mistake people make, is they get too emotional about it. They're not being logical. You gotta have the logical side of it too. What's the what's real, the reality of the situation.
Yeah, I mean, and especially you've had the experience where you grow, and the experience where you do it once and it can be like literally traumatic because they didn't think about any of that stuff.
Yes. And so it helps going through that. And I've had good advisors. I've had the same attorneys for all my deals, like the same exact guys. So I know them really, really well. And that's been helpful to have a lot of the same advisors that I trust almost as friends, not just, I literally had that kind of relationship with them. And that's maybe, I don't know if that's unique or not, but that's one thing good about being in different industries. At least I had the same attorney and he could talk straight to me, and I had the same CPA. And so it was helpful for them to, kind of look at things logically and talk to them. And I had a couple mentors that had bought and sold companies that could help me. And some of the private equity guys I work with, they had a lot of value. They were very, very helpful. And, and a good board is really, really helpful. The bigger you get, the more a board can be helpful. So I think the board can really help you be level-headed about a lot of these things and help you not look at them emotionally and get a lot of different opinions before you make your decision. So having a good board, have good advisors, and then, and then having an iBanker. I mean, I just felt I had a lot of advice and help. Still had to make a decision at the end of the day, but it was helpful to have a lot of different viewpoints before making decisions.
Mm-hmm. I think you're using other people's experience to be able to judge it instead of have to using the hard hard school way of doing it.
Right, for sure.
So, as we're wrapping up here, Jeff, I mean, you've got, because of all the different things we've talked about and all the good experience that you've had, is there something, I mean, and you just, dropped a bunch of amazing stuff right there. Is there one thing that you want to highlight that we talked about, or if there's something that we haven't talked about that you want to kind of, bring to light, what would it be?
Well, ironically, it's almost like it's a paradox, what we've been talking about thinking about the exit, stuff like that. I think people think about the exit too much and not creating value. So I think the number one thing is keep your priorities straight, which is, look, all the best companies I've seen, I met a lot of guys that have been successful in this valley. You think of lots of these high-tech companies, the ones that have been the most successful are the ones that are passionate about what they're doing. They're really focused on creating value first and, trying to win the marketplace. And then you start thinking about exit and other things as part of the process, and you do it by thinking ahead. And if you think of, doing strategic planning and thinking about a year out or 2 years out, and think, I always have quarterly offsites and yearly offsites. We think about those then, but, then you get your nose down the grindstone, you focus on value. So I think number one, always focus on value and building a company that you can be, you're taking care of the customer, doing all those things are the most important thing. And then the exits will work if you do that. But if you try to think of exit first, they just doesn't work. You don't create value focusing on the exit instead of focusing on taking care of customers. And that's when people, I think, screw up.
Well, it's interesting. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. However, I think you've got a unique dynamic that I think, I want to maybe ask you one last question, which is, how do you balance those two? Because that's so many times, Jeff, that I see people don't think about the exit as well. So like maybe I don't know if it's circles or people that that's, and it's kind of the tech world where grow to sell. And I do agree with that. But then there's this whole other sector of mid-market America that it's grow, passion, it's my life. And it might be a $20, $100 million, whatever size business
right.
But it's all their life. How do you balance? Because you mentioned like 10 minutes ago that you also have to think about it logically. So, what have you done that like literally allows you to balance the value creation, the fun, the enjoyment, and the logic behind it?
Well, I think we always I always focus on priorities and I write those down, and then I just really are disciplined to that. My priority is always number one, building a great team. And then number two is to build value for whatever we're doing. That's number two. And then number three, I think about, oh, hey, there's this financial side to it that's really important. Like we have to actually make money. So I do that order, build a team first. So I don't forget any of them, by the way. So some people, like I said, like to your point, you make a great point. Well, yeah, but some people, focus on that instead of, they focus on just building value. They think about, well, what the exit going to look like. And so as part of that, making money part, I think about the whole thing from like, oh, by the way, we need to be cash flow positive. That'd be really nice.
Right.
Then what's the next step? What's the next step? And some people don't worry about cash flow positive because they're focusing on, these high tech companies focus on just build, depends on what your strategy is. My last business I've been in, it was like, we never made money at Siberian because it was like, just build, grow. And don't worry about making money. Well, that'll happen later. And the company that bought us made a lot of money off what we did, our technology. The last companies I've been more about, it's been more like a Warren Buffett kind of a business, which is, okay, we're going to actually make cash flow. And that's, and so businesses have been more about, more of a, so the goals have been a little bit different, but as part of that, I think about, oh, now how would I exit? What would that look like? And how would I govern the company to get to do that? Even like the way I set the corporation, how would I do that? So I've somebody wants to acquire us, how would it be easier for them to do that based on how we set things up? So I think about that as in that bucket, as part of that. But yeah, you have to think about all of the above. Like, those are three areas the big areas I think about.
Yep.
And
yep.
financial, but that to me, it's like the third priority, but it's not like I don't do it. It's still a priority. It's like top three.
Do you realize that, and through your experience, that if you have that stuff in order and you've kind of got that plan, then you can almost kind of forget about it as well?
That's a great way to put it. That's kind of my point, I guess, a little bit, which is that you're doing it the right way and you set up structure the right way. And it kind of the exit kind of takes care of itself if you
plan for it.
Early on, right?
Right.
Like when I went to buy Beehive Brick, I mean, the guy had been buying snowmobiles. It was so screwed up. I mean, it was like, he wasn't thinking about, it was just like this. He had this cookie jar and he put money in it and he'd take it whatever he wanted. It was so screwed up. It was hard to even buy it, because it was so, he hadn't thought through that at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so I try to think of all three areas. But like you said, it's important. I just don't think you screw up or that you change the priorities. I think it is 1, 2, 3. And that is, however you want to do it. But the exit is not number one, but it has to be thought of, right? To your point, that doesn't mean it's not important at number 3, but it is 3. It's not 1 or 2.
But it's one of those, like you said, it's almost liberating, because if it's planned for and it's technically built and you talk about it, but then you can just go have fun and build value.
That's right. I mean, I literally feel at any point we could just sell it. Like, oh, I want to sell today. Okay, great. We've set it up properly. We can show value. We can show them, we can see how it could be a win for somebody. We're not planning it right now, but it's funny because when I sold Siberian, they came to us, which is it was so awesome, right? They come to you and say, hey. And it was funny is we said, oh, we think we have this other guy that's interested in this too. And then that weekend we went and talked to that company and they said, yeah, we're interested. And so then we were able to go back to them and say, we have somebody else that's interested too. So we'll kind of work with both of you guys. What's funny is the very next week they said, hey, you know what? We're not interested anymore. We of course didn't disclose that to them. Hey, they're not interested anymore. We didn't say anything. We didn't lie either. If they would have asked us, I would have said, yeah.
Right.
But it went so fast that they didn't know that they were out. And so it really created a more value because, they knew somebody else looking at us. And we probably could have been and talked to more people too, by the way. So there was value for other people would be interested, but we kind of created a little bit of competition. So it was nice that it helped put together something where they wanted it and they paid top dollar. So it was just time to sell. And it was like, hey, we knew it was going to be strategic and probably good timing. And again, we talked to the board, we talked to, advisors. And after talking to a whole bunch of people, we said, yeah, this is the right thing to do.
I think you covered so much ground, and I think it's a ton of good information. I mean, it's the balancing act, which you've got enough experience to be able to do it successfully, which is awesome. And I can't thank you enough for coming on the show, Jeff. What's the best way for our listeners to get in touch with you?
I'm at Jeff at jetdental.com. Jeff, Jeff at JETDENTAL.com.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for coming on the show.
Thank you, sir. Take care, Ryan.